Hello, my come read with me friends. I'm fresh out of the hot tub and a mess, so pardon the way I look. I didn't bother to even brush my hair, but I wanted to get this video done for you. In front of you, in front of me, you will see the 6 books on the consideration list for our December read, and I'm going to read just a couple of paragraphs out of each one to hopefully help you decide which one sounds best to you. The first one I'm going to read from is The Book Club Hotel, and the author is Sarah Morgan. And here we go. Chapter 1, Hattie. Maple Inn. Oops, let me start again. Maple Sugar Inn, how may I help you? Hattie answered the phone with a smile on her face because she discovered it was impossible to sound defeated, moody, or close to tears when you were smiling. And currently she was all of those things. I've been planning a trip to Vermont in winter for years, and then I spotted pictures of your inn on social media, a woman gushed. And it looks so cozy and welcoming, the type of place you just can't help but relax. It's an illusion, Hattie thought. There was no relaxation to be had here, not for her, at any rate. Her head throbbed and her eyes pricked following another night without sleep. The head housekeeper was threatening to walk out, and the executive chef had been late 2 nights running, and she was worried tonight might be the third, which would be a disaster because they were fully booked. Chef Tucker had earned the restaurant that coveted star, and his confit of duck had been known to induce moans of ecstasy from diners. But there were days when Hattie would have traded that star for a chef with a more even temperament. His temper was so hot, she sometimes wondered why he bothered switching on the grill. He could have yelled at the duck, and it would have been thoroughly singed in the flames of his anger. He was being disrespectful and taking advantage of her. Hattie knew that, and she also knew that she probably should fire him, but Brent had chosen him, and firing him would have severed another thread from the past. Also, conflict drained her energy, and right now she didn't have enough of that to go around. It was simpler to placate him. That is The Book Club Hotel by Sarah Morgan. And next up on the list, we have The Christmas Promise, Richard Paul Evans. I like the cover. Okie dokie. Chapter 1. If a girl cries alone in her house and no one hears, does she make a sound? Rochelle Bach's diary. Thinking back on that winter makes me feel cold. Maybe it was colder than usual. I remember there was an unusual polar front that glazed Salt Lake City in ice for a week. Still, I'm not sure if it was as cold as I remember or if I was just lonely. I'm not being facetious. Psychologists have proven that loneliness makes people feel cold, which is why single people drink more coffee and take longer, hotter showers than those in relationships. My father told me that. He was always dropping random facts the way a wedding planner scatters rose petals. Trivia like, Oxford University is 200 years older than the Aztec civilization. Or, a cloud weighs more than 1,000,000 pounds. Is that true? That's what my childhood was like. My father's name was Richard Bach, like the writer of that Seagull book, but not him. I was close to my father. He was my hero. When he died the previous January, I felt like part of me was buried with him, and I still do. I had 2 deaths that year. The second loss was my identical twin sister, Michelle. It was summer when she died, and that brought a whole different kind of cold. Most people assume that losing my twin was even harder than losing my father, but it wasn't. I had lost Michelle long before she died. My sister and I were estranged when she passed, and we hadn't spoken in more than 6 years. I was living alone in my father's home in Salt Lake City when I learned of her death from a stranger. Kind of sad. The Christmas Promise by Richard Paul Evans. Number 3 on our list. The Christmas Train by David Baldacci. I hope I'm saying that last name right. Can you pick up on a theme here? Christmas books. That's what we're going for. Chapter 1. Tom Langdon was a journalist, a globe-trotting one, because it was in his blood to roam widely. Where others saw only instability and fear in life, Tom felt graced by an embracing independence. He'd spent a bulk of his career in foreign lands covering wars, insurrections, famines, pestilence, virtually every kind of earthly despair. His goal had been relatively simple. He had wanted to change the world by calling attention to its wrongs. And he did love adventure. However, after chronicling all of these horrific events and still seeing the conditions of humanity steadily worsen, he'd returned to America filled with disappointment. Seeking an antidote for his melancholy, he'd started writing drearily light stories for ladies' magazines, home decorating journals, garden digests, and the like. However, after memorializing the wonders of compost and the miracle that was do-it-yourself wood flooring, he wasn't exactly fulfilled. It was nearing Christmas, and Tom's most pressing dilemma was getting from the East Coast to Los Angeles for the holidays. He had an age-old motivation for the journey. In LA was his girlfriend, Layla Gibson. She'd started out as a movie actress, but after years of appearing in third-rate horror films, she'd begun doing voiceover work. I think that would be fun. Now, instead of being cinematically butchered for her daily bread, she supplied the character voices for a variety of enormously popular Saturday morning cartoons. In the children's television industry, it was accepted that no one belted out the voices of goofy woodland creatures with greater flair and versatility than golden-piped Layla Gibson. As proof, she had a shelf full of awards, an outrageously large income, and a healthy share of syndication rights. What happens next? The Christmas Train by David Baldacci. And our fourth book on the list, 5 Tuesdays in Winter, Stories by Lily King. I think this is a collection of short stories. It has been reviewed by one of the authors we've read, Ann Patchett, who wrote Tom Lake, and she said, I loved this book. So that was good enough for me. Okay. The first chapter is entitled Creature. The summer I was 14, a few months after my mother had moved us out of my father's house, I was offered a job on Widow's Point, babysitting this old lady's grandchildren who had come to visit for 2 weeks. Mrs. Pike got her dresses fitted at my mother's shop, and the two of them made these arrangements without even consulting me. It wasn't like my other babysitting jobs, a few hours at a time. I had to live there. I can't remember the conversation with my mother, if I'd wanted to go or if I'd put up a fight. I fought her on so many things back then. The point was a frying pan-shaped spit of land that thrust into the Atlantic. Beyond it, at low tide, you could see a crescent of rocks offshore, but at high tide, the water hid them entirely. No doubt it was those rocks, several hundred years earlier, that made the widows who'd given the point its name. My father still owned the house I'd grown up in, on the handle of the pan. And to get to the Pikes from our apartment downtown, I had to pass on my bike. He was in rehab again, in New Jersey this time. But I still kept my head low as I pedaled by. All I saw was the bed of flowers along the road, untended since last fall, new shoots and buds trying to push up through brown husks. This was the third time we'd moved out, and I hoped the last. Lily King, 5 Tuesdays in Winter. Number 5, The Matzo Ball by Jean Meltzer. I like the cover of this one. Here we go. She just needed one more. Rachel Rubenstein Goldblatt stared at the collection of miniature Christmas figurines spread across her desk. She owned 236 of the smiling porcelain Santas from the world-famous Holiday Dreams collection. When her best friend Mickey arrived, she would complete the collection with the addition of the coveted Margaritaville Santa. Oh, the Margaritaville Santa. How she had dreamed of the day when that tiny porcelain Santa in a Hawaiian shirt and wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses would sit atop her prized collection. Rachel had scoured eBay for the tiny limited edition figurine, set up price alerts, and left frantic, somewhat drunken, posts at 3 a.m. on collector blogs. Now, after 6 years, 5 months, and 7 days of hunting, the Margaritaville Santa would finally be hers. The anxiety was killing her. The Matzo Ball by Jean Meltzer. And our last book, Rosamund Pilcher brings us A Winter Solstice. The first chapter is entitled Elfrida. Before Elfrida Phipps left London for good and moved to the country, she made a trip to the Battersea Dogs Home and returned with a canine companion. It took a good and heart-rending half hour of searching, but as soon as she saw him sitting very close to the bars of his kennel and gazing up at her with the dark and melting eyes, she knew he was the one. She did not want a large animal, nor did she relish the idea of a yapping lapdog. This one was exactly the right size, dog size. He had a lot of soft hair, some of which fell over his eyes, ears that would prick or droop, and a triumphant plume of a tail. His coloring was irregularly patched brown and white. The brown bits were the exact shade of milky cocoa. When asked his ancestry, the kennel maid said she thought there was border collie there, and a bit of bearded collie, as well as a few other unidentified breeds. Elfrida didn't care. She liked the expression on his gentle face. She left a donation for the Battersea Dogs Home, and her new companion traveled away with her, sitting in the passenger seat of her old car and gazing from the window in a satisfied fashion, as though this were the life to which he was happy to become accustomed. The next day, she took him to the local poodle parlor for a cut, shampoo, and blow dry. He returned to her fluffy and fresh and smelling sweetly of lemonade. His response to all of this attention was a show of faithful, grateful, and loving devotion. He was a shy, even a timid dog, but brave as well. If the doorbell rang, or if he thought he spied an intruder, he barked his head off for a moment, and then he retreated to his basket or Elfrida's lap. It took some time to decide on a name for him, but in the end, she christened him Horace. And that was the name of my first boyfriend. Crazy. That is Winter Solstice by Rosamund Pilcher. So we have Winter Solstice. We have The Matzo Ball. Next up, 5 Tuesdays in Winter. And then The Christmas Train. The Christmas Promise, not to be confused with The Christmas Train. And last but not least, The Book Club Hotel. I hope there's something among those books that interests you for December. Please be sure to vote. Talk to you guys later. Bye.